Thank you so much for being here this afternoon to talk about fostering diverse schools and our maps that have recently been released to the public. Actually, it's today, right? Today, released to the public today. This is an important step in redesigning our residential boundaries. For the last 32 years, Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools has been using the same residential boundaries to determine where children attend during school, and yet during that time, a lot has changed in the county. The county has changed significantly. Actually, over 100,000, we have more than 100,000 residents than we did in 1993. And we have new and growing residential areas and highways. So a lot has changed in that amount of time, and so it is time for us to actually look at our boundaries and honestly not wait another 30 years as we look at boundaries, because a lot changes over time. And so the boundaries over time have become inefficient. Some schools are overcrowded, some are under-enrolled, transportation inefficiencies have arisen. Sometimes a family actually drives past one school to get to another on their way to the school their child attends. And our schools have become less socioeconomically diverse over time as well. So today we are sharing 3 sets of revised maps that seek to resolve some of these issues created by outdated boundaries. These maps, and I'm sure you're going to hear more from my colleagues, but were designed after a large amount of time in community sessions. And so you're going to hear more about that, how they even were created in the first place. Today's release is going into another amount of time for community impact, community feedback. And so we are calling through this process, we are calling on our whole community to help us determine the best way to redesign our residential boundaries as we move forward. And so 2 people and other team members have been leading the charge for this very important work that we're doing. And so I'm going to have Dr. Effie McMillan and Mr. Frank Pantano talk to you more and give you some more details. When they're finished, we'll open up the floor to questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm going to speak a little bit about the project and how we have gotten here. So we did receive the Fostering Diverse Schools grant about 2 years ago. October 2023 is when we received our award letter. The grant program was focused on meeting academic, social, emotional, and mental health needs of students by increasing access to more socioeconomically diverse schools and inclusive learning environments. So there's tons of research that is out there about the benefits for all children that do attend a school that is socioeconomically diverse. It provides students with experience with children from all different walks of life. For example, it's a real critical part for a full, well-rounded learning and education that colleges, currently universities, and employers within our community also speak to just the benefits and the evidence and need, and they're increasingly looking for people that leave public school systems that come with colleagues from different backgrounds. Research has also shown that when there is a socioeconomically diverse school, that there are lower suspension rates, there's higher achievement academically across all groups, there's better teacher retention, that is really important, greater parent engagement in schools, and that students leave those environments with skills like leadership, creativity, teamwork, critical thinking, and all of those skills that colleges, universities, and employers are looking for also align with the North Carolina's Portrait of a Graduate and the district's Portrait of a Graduate. Let me just back a little bit. I didn't click. As Ms. McManus said, we have engaged with the community quite a bit for the last about 9 months. You can see on the screen here just all the different ways in which we engaged and how we heard from people. So last year we had really extensive outreach to students, staff, parents, and community members. just to get their insight and input on thinking about modernizing residential boundaries. We had about 12,000 people to participate. Collaboration with our research partners, the Plural Connections Group out of Northeastern University, utilize all of the feedback that we received to set the priorities for our district and for schools that went into shaping the maps that were released today.
Thank you, Superintendent McManus and Dr. McMillan. So I think they did a great job of covering the why, the project goals, these four things of trying to bring students from different backgrounds together, make schools less crowded, save some money and time on transportation, and keep students together as they move from elementary to middle to high school. So what I'm going to talk to you about now is how well we were able to do that with our proposed models. My name is Frank Pantano, the Executive Director of Choice and Magnet Schools. So one of the departments that I oversee is student assignment. So I hear from parents all the time when they have questions about, what school do I go to? What's the next school that I go to? How about my siblings of my children and all those different things? So this is sort of near and dear to my heart because I don't want families to have to go really far to get to their residential school. And I also want to make sure that those kids get to stay with their friends when they go up. That's the school feeder patterns. And of course, diversity is important for getting kids around all different types. So you can see there's 3 different maps, and we have some examples up here. And this is just high school. We have them also for middle and elementary school. And the different maps deliver in different ways on the metrics, right? So the first map, map A, does a really good job of delivering on that diversity goal. But it does not do as good a job on home to school distance or school feeder patterns. And in fact, school feeder patterns get worse. So there's more options for students to have to go to a different middle school than their peers if they're in elementary, or a different high school than their peers if they're in middle. But it's only that map that hasn't happened. Map B still delivers really well, 4 stars on diversity, and on the website, parents can drill down and see exactly what that means. It also decreases the average distance for our families, so it kind of delivers on that transportation efficiency goal that we're going for. And it also reduces the number of times that students are split up from their friends when they're going up from elementary to middle to high. So map B delivers on all the goals that we're looking for. And specifically, when I say we, I mean our community. So these goals were specifically derived from those community engagement sessions. Finally, map C doesn't do as good a job on the diversity goal, but it does a little bit better on the distance, and it does the same with school feeder patterns. So I wanted to make sure that since this is a needed thing for our community, something that hasn't been done in over 30 years, we wanted to make sure that we had the gamut of options for people to weigh in on, let us know how we can adjust them. This isn't meant to be like a vote on A, B, or C for the community. It's more tell us about the pros and cons of all of them, and we're going to take all that feedback into account and iterate, almost crowdsource to the community to make even better maps so that what we end up giving to the board is the best possible new maps. So I do have a couple of important notes that, from the community engagement, we heard about things that would be important to people, but we also heard about fears and concerns. All right, so one of the fears and concerns we heard about was, well, I remember busing, and I don't want my kid to have to drive really far on a bus and have a really far away school. And so one of the things that we were able to do is make sure that those drive distances get less instead of get more. So if anything, we're almost busing kids now, and we need to fix it so that we're not busing them to further away schools anymore. Students are not going to be removed from their current schools. So what that means is we have a policy that's already in place that if a student moves to a different residential boundary, even today, they can still continue going to their old school because we want families to have that consistency in their life. Even if they have transients in their address, they still have consistency in their school here in our district. So that's important to note that no one's going to be uprooted from their school with this process. Also, the new boundaries won't go into effect until 26-27 school year, so 2 years at the earliest, right? So we'd be proposing it, these are the maps, and then we got to figure out exactly how we would implement as we go on. And like I mentioned in reverse, this is not a busing initiative. If anything, it's an anti-busing initiative. We're trying to make sure that families are at the best school for them for residential purposes.
And so as we begin to wrap up, as you heard earlier today, that the maps, first draft of maps was released today. And I just want to emphasize it's the first draft of maps that was created based on the feedback that we received during our first round of community engagement. Everyone's voice across this community is important and vital in this process. So for the next couple of months, we're going to be going back to the community to give input feedback on this set of maps. There are sessions that will be available in person. Those have been scheduled just through the end of March right now. Additional dates will be added, including virtual options, some additional options that will allow families to be able to join in at 6 p.m. So that it will work with work schedules for those who may get off at 5 o'clock in the evenings. And we're going to be taking all of that feedback to refine, improve, to Frank's point, what those maps will look like before it goes to the board for consideration and a vote. So no final decisions have been made yet. Once the feedback has happened, it's refined, we're coming back to the community again for another look and additional input before there's any consideration from the board and before we make any recommendations. And so on the screen, those are ways that community can go ahead and start looking at the maps and how they can register for any of the upcoming sessions that have already been outlined. So with that, we'll open it up for questions. We have 3 rounds right now. The ones that Frank mentioned earlier, there's A, B, and C options. And when members of the community go into the platform where they can begin to look at those maps, they can see option A for elementary, middle, high school. So it is multiple maps. There's 3 sets and it covers each level. So for the next 2 months, we're going to be working on getting feedback from the community about these drafts. And then we're going to take that feedback and take some time to process that to improve the maps based on the feedback that we receive. And then we're anticipating June to go back for the next round of feedback based on the improved maps.
So the 4 maps up here, the least efficient map is the current one on all the metrics that the community's told us to. So I think the goal is to come up with the best possible. So I think the answer is no. We wouldn't want to not change at all because we're way overdue with changing.
There's already a bunch of parents online who are like, I don't want my kid to go to Parkland, or I don't want my kid to go to a certain school. What would you say to those parents who are reluctant because that the idea of maybe looking at a middle school age child in their home and thinking, well, that's not what I had in mind?
I can start and someone can jump in. That is not, anytime you do boundary changes, I've been part of those, not here, but in other places, you're going to hear that. People have a thought of where I want my child to go from the time they're born and all the way up through high school. What I would say is we have great indicators in every school of beyond just a school grade. There's so much happening within schools. So I would say specifically to Parkland, let's go and see what's happening there. I mean, there is great, I just did a See for Yourself there about a month ago, and there's some great teaching and learning happening in schools and some great extracurriculars and activities. And so I think, you know, I think that that is a normal reaction, and I understand that. As a mom, as a grandparent, I understand that. But at the end of the day, I think that changing residential boundaries is inevitable. You can't go 30 years and not change boundaries when you've had new developments created and new roads built. It is just part of a process that should have already happened. So I would say, you know what? We are working very hard on many initiatives to make sure all of our schools are high quality, and that is beyond what people assume to be high quality. There's so many measures that determine the quality of a school, and it's not just all about one.
And this is an interesting time, I think, on that same note, is that the federal administration
Yeah, so it's, we are analyzing what all of this means. As far as impact on our own district, we were part of, I know it's already been in the paper, but one grant that was really about teacher recruitment, and so that was, we were not the fiscal agent on that, Wake Forest University was, but that's impacting that type of grant. We're looking at everything that we're doing, and really when, that this is about economic diversity, which is not an area that is addressed in any of the language that we've received. There's a lot about racial diversity and other things, but economic diversity has not been a subject of concern. Right. Right. I'm going to turn over to F, but I will say one thing. If you were to have all 5 stars colored on diversity, we would have had to do what we said we wouldn't do, and that was bus students a far way away. So that is, we said from the beginning that is not something that we had planned to do through this process, but I'll let you continue.
So that is a really, really good question. I think that is one of the reasons why we applied. When the grant was offered, you could do 1 year, 2-year planning grant, or you could do an implementation grant. And we chose intentionally to focus on the 2-year planning grant because we wanted to make sure that we had ample time to engage with the community, the entire community, from every corner of the community, to hear what families had to say about how they're experiencing the system, the impacts the current boundaries have on them, and what was important to them. That is why the things that are up here came to light as what were lifted as priorities across so much data that we had. It could be challenging to have 5 stars on all of them, to the superintendent's point about busing, but we also have to think about just geographically our current landscape, and some things just would not make sense because it would create greater challenges for families, and that is one of the things that we definitely do not want to do. I know there was a question that came up earlier that I just want to reiterate, is that our current policy says that when new boundaries come into place, that children can remain in their school for their grade span. So if they're in elementary school, they could stay at that elementary school until it's time to move to their middle school. I also want to point out that this will be a process of phasing in. We do not want to disrupt or totally upset people's lives through the transition. So a part of hearing from the community this time will give us some insight too on what might be some of our best approaches for implementation, so that when we do go to the board, we can say, here was some consensus around what we learned about what is important to our community and which features of the map are really important, and then here are ways that we would propose that we could implement in a way that is gradual and without really disrupting families' lives tremendously. And so Frank wants to add as well.
One quick thing too about that is that this is a bit of a paradigm shift too, because usually when you look to try to diversify schools, you're looking at busing, you're looking at further away. So in some ways, the fact that we have options that improve on every single metric was a pleasant surprise. It's an exciting opportunity for us, because the thing that we're losing is just inefficiency. The thing that we're losing is the fact that we haven't updated. The thing that we're losing is that we're not modern. So excited about that.
Just one follow-up on that. I know that some parents on consulting also refer to their school might lose Title I status if we shift kids around, or some of those benefits and things, programs they have access to. Do you anticipate that?
You know what, I would need to see like what is impacted with each of, like, depending on each map. What would that mean for socioeconomic diversity? Right now, we use the 50% threshold as our determining factor of if a school is Title I. Many of our schools are way above that. And so I'm thinking there won't be a ton of change with that, especially when we think about, where we are as a community with being with economically disadvantaged families in socioeconomic status. So I couldn't tell you that off the bat, but I don't foresee a huge impact, will it? Income, that's a good point. You want to say that? I remember that.
So I think it's also important too that for Title I funding, they primarily focus in on income only. And so when we were looking at it, we could have looked totally at income, but there's more to it than that. So we looked at multiple factors, including income, but also the education levels of families within a certain census block. We looked at household, like if it's a single-parent home, two-parent home, based on information that is publicly available nationally. We also looked at if the home is, English might not be the primary first language. So instead of just focusing on one single thing, we looked at multiple things that create socioeconomic diversity.
No, so this is really, this iteration, these decisions will be strictly about residential boundaries. They're not addressing choice policies and choice. I'm sure after this is said and done, we will need to look at all that, because right now, they're designed in a certain way where there are certain schools you can choose from within a residential zone, within a zone. Not really residential, but a zone. And so at the end of the day, all of that will be looked at, but not as part of this process. That's gonna be left alone for now. No, so all of those options will remain, and that's why it's so important. Frank's been a huge part of this. They've been partners in this work, but all your magnet options will remain, with Atkins and Parkland, and all of those programs are still part of the choice application process, and students will continue to choose into those schools. This does not impact that. Yes. Mhm.
Right. Do you remember the percentage? I can't remember the percentage off the top of my head, and I should know that. When we looked at our schools, and I don't want to misspeak, it was around 20, in the 20-something range, mid-20s maybe, that were high concentrations of poverty. That is information I could definitely get to you as a specific number. I just don't want to quote a wrong number off the top of my head, but a pretty significant number of schools that have concentration of poverty, but also on the other end of the spectrum too, as well. Yes, to the greatest extent possible.
Yeah. So bell schedules have not changed and are not changing. I will say that first and foremost. I'm not sure. I've tried for a couple years to adjust so we wouldn't have 14 different bell schedules, and that has not been supported. So we're not bringing that one up right now anymore. So there are no bell schedule changes that have occurred in our district for I don't know how many years. As far as code changes, this is our third year of implementation of our code, and the only changes that will be made to that are we have an implementation team that's being formed with teachers and many people after a round of listening sessions in every school, and so a team of people, of practitioners will be coming together to decide are there any adjustments that need to be made. And so that's a regular iteration. You do that every year when you're talking about continuous improvement for anything you do, so that's not a major change. This is a phased in. This is probably the most thoughtful approach I've ever seen to boundary changes. And I've been at this for 35 years, and that's in places, meaning it's not just, we're gonna change these boundaries. It's looking at the entire landscape, and it's a pretty methodical process. If you know, like a 9 months of listening and more months of putting maps together and more months of soliciting feedback and then redrawing and then more time to listen to feedback. Like, it's an extensive process, so it's not just an immediate change. But all of these things are necessary. Times, you know, we have to update our practices with times changing and with changes and with new challenges that we are faced with on a daily basis. So I would say we have 3 main initiatives, and we've had those. This is the 3rd year of all 3 of them, and those are the 3 things we're doing. This is an operational initiative around boundary changes, and again, one that most districts don't wait over 30 years to do. Yeah. So actually, everything we do on a daily basis is about education. Like, that's why we exist. And so honestly, that is not, I'm not sure, my question would be a question back on how would you address education in a boundary change? I think that would be my question back, because that doesn't make any sense. So I think the most important thing is that our whole focus is always education. Every strategy we have, all 3 initiatives we're focused on, are improving academics, outcomes for children, behavior, making sure every child is future ready. Like, that's all we do on a daily basis. But you can't focus on that when you have major inefficiencies that are causing other issues for your school district. So that's how I would respond to that. But we've never taken our eye off the prize of making sure every student has a high quality education. That's all we do on a daily basis. That's every meeting I attend. Unfortunately, I have to attend a lot of finance meetings, because that is all about our budget and making sure we're living within our budget. And making sure the budget aligns to our priorities, but all of our priorities are about our strategic plan, which has 5 goals for our children, and the majority of that is focused on academics and academic outcomes. Yes? You want to check? Okay.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So it's interesting. When we first went into it, we were thinking, all right, we want to modernize and get more efficient, and we want to try to increase socioeconomic diversity. But you notice that's not all that we ended up making the maps based on. Feeder patterns was actually from the community, and we were kind of surprised, like, okay, so what the people are really interested in is those social emotional bonds that kids make with each other, and being able to stay together with their group of friends or their group of kids going up from. So I was a little surprised that feeder patterns, like, it's something that in my job I deal with feeder patterns all the time, right, with student assignment. I didn't realize the community was so passionate about it, so that was kind of interesting.
Do you want to talk?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so we've started getting emails already with that exact question on the website. It's got it there. So we have a sibling preference policy. So if there's a student at that middle school, then the sibling preference policy would still remain intact, and that student could follow to that old middle school. So I think I've had like 7 or 8 iterations of that same question, but it is important to let the community know that we're not getting rid of the sibling preference policy, and that our goal is to be more efficient. And it's not efficient for families to have to drive their kids to multiple different middle schools. So we're always going to have that policy. So there has been a lot of that question about would render changes moot. I think what's important to know is that we do have a robust choice and magnet program. It's in my title, so I feel strongly about it. But only about 10% of our community actually takes advantage of choice and magnet. And then about 20% are at their school because of things like sibling preference, or things like they've moved to a different residential boundary, but their grandfather didn't allow to stay at their school, because we're trying to give them that consistency. But 70% of our students go to their residential zones, even with all those robust choice options. So again, this is a way to have a baseline that's for those residential kids. So I don't think it's moot.
And I have the numbers in front of me now. So I didn't want to misspeak earlier about when we first started this work, and the very first part was understanding our landscape. We presented to the board back, I think it was March last year, March of last year, that we had about 32 schools that had high concentration of poverty out of our 81 schools that we have in the district. We had about 24 at that time that was pretty economically diverse, and then about 23 that had higher concentrations of wealth. So that kind of gives a breakdown of what our current structures look like when it speaks to socioeconomic diversity in our district.
Thank you.